Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us, and welcome back from your independence holidays. Okay, and on to business. Our guest this morning is Dr. Isiaka Yahaya. Dr. Isiaka Yahaya is Director of Public Affairs at the National Population Commission. Good morning to you, Dr. Yahaya.
Good morning. Good morning, Nigerians.
Indeed. Thank you very much. I guess to find out a bit more about the census for 2023. You know, we've been at this for quite a while, and it's thought that when I say at this, various attempts to take a census, but why hasn't it been possible in something like the past 16 years to do the kind of census that would leave one sure that we have solid data? What has been the problem in the past 16 years?
Well, thank you very much. We have the mandate to conduct the next population and housing census. As you observe, the last census was conducted in 2006, and the next census should have been due in 2016. And the National Population Commission was prepared, to conduct that census as at when due, because that's when that's the period the United Nations recommended that the census should be conducted every 10 years. In fact, immediately after 2006, we started the arrangements for the next census. A strategy and implementation plan was put in place, developed, and with the intention of conducting a digital and transformative census. In addition, we started what we call the enumeration area demarcation, which involved the division of the entire landmass of Nigeria into a small area that can be covered by a pair of enumerators. All those arrangements were put in place, but by 2016, when the census should have been conducted, the Population Commission did not get the nod from the federal government, to proceed. As you know, a census is a very complex exercise. It has rightly been described as next to war in terms of mobilization of human resources. So any government that will need to give approval for the census will need to take a number of considerations into account. For example, they want to see whether the economy could sustain it, whether the security situation was ripe enough, quite a number of issues. But we are not in the position to say why government did not give us the go-ahead. All I could say, and confidently at this point, is to say that the National Population Commission was prepared to conduct the 2016, as it is confidently ready to conduct another census in April 2023.
Okay. As you know, in our national calendar, that whole time period, April 2023 that you talk about, is really jam-packed, what with the election and what with the inauguration of the new president within a month of, the date that you state. But something else, Dr. Yahaya, that I noticed, it's properly called the Population and Housing Census. Talk to me a bit about that.
Yes, thank you very much. Actually, the exercise is basically a census, which is the enumeration of persons, living within the geographic space of the country. But an element has been added. It is also an housing census. And this is consistent, with international best practice. The census is supposed to provide information on the demographic characteristics of the country to be used for planning. But to maximize the use of that data, for planning purposes, you need to look at the people within the context in which they live. That's the housing. In other words, the people to be counted, they live in houses. They live in households. And if you can get information about the household, you are increasing the utility of the data you are generating. For example, you'll be collecting information on the facilities in that house. You are also collecting information on the number of people living in the house, how they feed, the sources of electricity, whether they have telephone, whether they have ICT. So when you have this whole range of information, you are in a better place, to get that kind of data that will be more useful, for planning purposes, rather than getting information without the houses. So that's why the housing element of the census has been added, to the next population and housing census. It's just to increase the utility of the data for planning purposes.
Okay, and as you were speaking, it occurred to me that in other countries, especially in the West, and I'm sure they exist in our side of the world too, people talk about homeless people. You hear about that in European capitals. We don't know that any particular study has been taken, but we also know that in urban areas, the underbridge, there are people who live under the bridges, as we say locally. So I was just, as you were saying that, and the dwellings of citizens, I was just wondering, one, if you think Nigeria has an appreciably homeless population, and how those would be addressed. Did you hear me, Dr. Yahaya? Okay. I was.
Yeah, I'm losing you. I didn't get the last two sentences.
Okay, the last two sentences would have been in the area of, one, do you think Nigeria has an appreciable population of homeless people? And against the backdrop of what you've just explained about the addition of the housing census added to it, how is the Commission going to engage with that?
Yeah.
Okay, no problem. But can you hear me now? Can you hear me right now?
Yeah, but I can get your point and I can respond, I can respond to that.
Okay.
I got your point and I can respond to that.
Please go ahead, sir.
On your question, whether we have sizable number of people who are not living in regular households, of course we do. Those are the people we call the special population.
Special population.
No data can be
Sorry, sir.
provided.
Did you say
from
special?
Empirical evidence we have, you can find them here and there. When you go to the markets, you go to the under the bridge, and everywhere they are there. And as far as the census is concerned, these people must be counted. Without them, the census is not complete. Because census is the enumeration of all persons, including those in regular households and those who are on the street. And the Commission has actually put in place, a very elaborate and scientific ways, of counting the special population.
Okay, okay.
There is what we call the census night. In fact, the census period itself commences with what we call the census night. And during that period, we go to the marketplaces, to under the bridges, and where you can find all these, and also abandoned houses, where you can find all these special population.
Oh, okay. Okay.
The advantage of trying to get them at this period is the fact that this is the period that they will stay in one place. Unlike during the daytime when they will need to move from one area to the other. So on that day, we start the enumeration with them, go to marketplaces where they are, try to get their names and all their demographic information to be captured. And they will be actually be recorded as being in non-regular household. We have done this when the trial census was conducted, in all the 6 local government areas where full enumeration was carried out.
I see.
And we are satisfied, from the outcome of that exercise that people this special population, those who stay in irregular households can be counted. And they are not just the only people that we may have, there could be problem of counting. We also have those who stay, the nomadic population, those who stay, who are always on the move, those who stay on the high rivers, inside hard-to-reach area. All these are, what we call special population. They are special because you cannot count them, like we will count the normal places. You need to put in place extra measure. And as part of preparation for this, we have conducted research, first to identify where they are, and then put in place mechanisms to enumerate them during the census.
Okay. I'm sure we'll talk about some of the benefits and purposes and of the census, an accurate census. But recently, when the president was addressing a gathering of stakeholders, he had put the estimation of the population of Nigeria at 216,784,381. Let's just say 216 million. Just forget the other one. Now, that coming from the president, that must be an intelligent guesstimate. If a census has not been conducted in quite a bit, and there was a time when it was popular to speak about Nigerians being about 100 million. Then it jumped to 120, 150. Now people are talking about over 200 million. And now the president has joined in with his estimate, and that must have been on very good advice, of 216 million. How do we arrive in the polity? How do we arrive at these guesstimates, which is what I imagine that they are?
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, I cannot confirm that the president has given, the projection of the population of Nigeria, but all I know is that most international organizations, they actually have a projection of the Nigerian population, which falls within the region you have just mentioned. And let me just say this, that this projection you are talking about, they actually come from census conducted by the National Population Commission. UNICEF, World Bank, or United Nations, they don't come into Nigeria to carry out any demographic exercise. But they rely on the population, or the base population given by the National Population Commission. They also rely on the growth rate, and on the basis of that, they do the extrapolation and arrive at a certain figure. In fact, the National Population Commission has always done this. If you ask me, we have the projected population of Nigeria, not just at the national level, but even for all the states of the Federation and also the local government areas, based on the growth rate. There is a national average for the population, which is in the region of 3.2%. But the growth rate for every state and every local government, they are not the same. And we actually have data where we have all these projections. And some of these projections, they're actually taken, from the National Population Commission. So those projections, they are not totally out of the work the National Population Commission has done. But the point is, having this projection does not invalidate the urgent need for a national population. Like every projection, it cannot be accurate. And projection, loses its value as time passes. Obviously, for a rapid changing population like that of Nigeria, where the demographic indices such as birth rate, death rate, rate of migration change very rapidly. Obviously, you cannot use a 15-year projection to arrive at any meaningful extrapolation of the size and characteristics of the Nigerian population.
Okay.
So there is the need, in spite of the fact that we have this projection, there is the need to have a national census.
Indeed. And as we are, working with statistics, and as you've just explained, the National Population Commission keeps an eye on things. I I think it is sort of generally agreed, at least in statistical terms, perhaps even in realistic terms, that Nigeria at the moment is the 6th most populous country in the world, and it is said that by 2015, it is expected to become the 3rd most populous country in the world after India and China. Those figures, can one work with those figures, imprecise as they are?
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. Actually, Nigeria is the 7th most populous nation in the world. You know,
right now,
first,
7th most
populous in Africa, and is estimated to be the 3rd most populous country, you know, by 2050, you know, behind China and India. Mm-hmm. We are likely to overtake some other countries who are more populous than Nigeria by now, like United States, for example. We may overtake them, you know, given the rate, the momentum of the population. So the characterization of Nigeria as the 7th most populous nation of the world is based on the projection, and those projections, they're actually not too far-fetched.
I see. Okay. And, you know, this has been worked out. I wonder how much, because this in itself, by the time a successful census is concluded, it'll be part of the records of the country. And this is an area in which it has been said that we haven't really, you know, outdone ourselves. We haven't really excelled in keeping records. I don't know, things like death certificates, birth certificates, records, and, you know, all those kind of things that you know, people can refer to in other countries, where you can look back a century in some countries because of their record takings and know who lived at a certain place and that kind of a thing. Those are those like the advanced levels of population? I mean, can generations perhaps yet unborn be able to look at the census and be able to use it for research purposes? Is that the plan with this? I think you said earlier something about international best practices will be observed.
Yeah, I'm listening to you.
Oh dear, you still couldn't, you couldn't hear it all? Dr. Yahaya? You didn't hear? Okay, well, let me try again. I was saying that it is thought that we have not excelled ourselves in public record keeping. And I was asking if the objective now would be to address that, because in other countries, as you well know, you could look at records, population census records, and actually, you know, use it to infer some things, maybe even pinpoint who lived where, you know, 80 years ago, 90 years ago, that kind of a thing. I mean, what kind of a study, because that is what it will be, really, this national population census that we're going to be conducting, will generations unborn, is the question that I had asked, be able in the future to use this? Is that the kind of statistics that we're going to be aiming for?
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. I thought I heard you, but let me just respond. The mandate of the National Population Commission, in addition to the conduct of census, also include registration of births and deaths in the country. You know, to put in place machinery for that, and also collate the data. And the intention really is to use the data as a complementary source of information, you know, on our population. But I must admit that over the years, we have some challenges that have not made it possible for us to have a comprehensive population, comprehensive registration of births and deaths. So the statistics we have collected, or we have been collecting on that, cannot be totally accurate. And the President Commission is conscious of that. So we are now moving, you know, to rejuvenate the civil registration system, you know, through electronic, we are using what we call the ECRVS, that's Electronic Civil and Vital Registration System. Through this, you know, we move away from the manual ways of collecting information on birth and deaths, and also putting them on an electronic platform in which all the information will be registered and they can be stored and can be accessed in future. In addition, the certificate to be given, will be electronic. It is not just the physical paper given to you, wherever you are in the world. Going through the portal, you can have access to the certificate. I would believe, this is an effort we are trying to do, with the support of international organizations such as the UNICEF. They've been doing a lot of work. Pilot has been carried out in some of the states. And in the near future, we'll be able to expand to all states of the Federation. So when we have this in place, the possibility of accessing information 50 years, 100 years from now, will not be difficult again. So we're actually moving to that. But the other part of it that we are doing is that in addition to putting in place, the mechanism for registry, we also need to generate the demand side of the vital registration to ensure that all births are registered. And we are carrying out a lot of public enlightenment on this to ensure that parents and caregivers endeavor to register their births. Immediately those births are given. We are also making efforts to ensure that deaths are registered. You agree with me that there are a lot of cultural issues around death registration, which has been very difficult, really, because people believe with birth they will need the certificate, for school, for immigration, for passport and all those. But in the case of death, it's been difficult and we've not really been able to achieve. But we believe, with the legislation we have in place and also enlightenment, trying to change attitude that even in death, it's not over yet. We'll be able to also record appreciable progress in what we call civil and vital registration. I know the advantage of this that we will now have something that we can use to update the census, within the inter-census period. But make no mistake, but even if you have a very good, excellent birth and death registration system, there will also be the need to conduct census, within a given period, preferably not more than 10 years.
Indeed.
No country has been able to substitute, the conduct of census, with the vital registration system or other means of collecting information.
Okay.
In fact, some countries do conduct their census at a more regular interval of 5 years.
Okay, and I would imagine that's probably because this information that will be gleaned from such exercises are vital for their developmental planning and that kind of a thing. Yeah, okay. Now, as you were speaking, I was wondering, this is a different era that we are living in. The world has become a global village. Nigerians are in every corner of the world, and I imagine that they would amount to a sizable population on their own. What are the arrangements for, to indeed count our nationals that are sprinkled all over the world? Okay, I just asked, Doctor, that what are the arrangements on ground to count Nigerians in diaspora, Nigerians sprinkled all over the world?
Okay, yeah, I got the point.
Okay.
Let me respond very quickly. The definition of census is the counting or enumeration of all persons resident in the country or within a geographical space. So the counting of Nigerians will not be part of census. In other words, in 2023 census, we are not going to count Nigerians who are not within the geographical space of Nigeria. This is consistent with international practice. Nobody counts its population outside the country within the context of the census. This can be done. And I support that it can be done. And I also know the kind of value this can add, to the planning process. But counting nationals outside the geographic space of Nigeria is not part of census and could not have been done within the context of the 2023 census.
Okay, that's interesting to know. Now, the flip side of that question, since you've defined what a census is, in professional statistical terms, therefore, all foreigners that are living in the country at the time of the census, they are resident in the country, will they be counted?
Yes, they will be counted.
I see. So,
and information collected on their migration status, how long they have been living in Nigeria, their countries of origin, and where they have stayed. In fact, I need to state that migration is also an important component of the census questionnaire that will be laid, will be collected during the census. So we are going to count foreign nationals in Nigeria.
Okay, foreign nationals in Nigeria will be counted. Nigerian nationals outside of Nigeria will not be counted, and that is really nothing extraordinary. This is the way it is done, if only people know about it. Okay. I was wondering, Doctor, maybe I should go on a break now. Stay with us, please. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back, and our guest is Dr. Isiaka Yahaya, Director, Public Affairs, National Population Commission. It's been a while since we've conducted a census. Dr. Yahaya has explained to us, why that has been. Nigeria is thought to be the 6th most populous in the world, but Dr. Yahaya sort of updated that figure in that. I hope it is not that you can't hear again. Dr. Yahaya, I'm so sorry about this. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Okay, I can hear you for now.
For now, okay. Now, part of the reason for a census, no doubt, must also be in order to make sure that the vulnerable in our population don't escape the catchment net, so people can know what to do about them. Now, concentrating for the moment on this vulnerable population, those in urban centers, they know all about it. But people in rural areas, for instance, you said there will be a drive to get people to become familiar with the registration processes like births, like deaths, and that kind of a thing. Can you speak a bit about this vulnerable aspect of our population that I imagine governments around the world, certainly not, without Nigeria not being an exception, will want to know about so that they can take required assistance to those sectors? The vulnerable populations. How do you understand that as a population statistician?
Okay. Well, you talk about what is the Commission plan to cover the vulnerable population.
Yes. Okay.
Well, like I said earlier, the population census is the enumeration of all persons, whether they are vulnerable or non-vulnerable. But maybe if you mean by vulnerability, that's those who are located within the hinterland, the rural areas. Whether there are plans for us to count that, definitely yes. We have enumerated the whole geographical space of Nigeria and the vulnerable people, wherever they are, whether in the urban or even in the rural areas, they are there. We're going to count them in their household where they are. The census is very, very inclusive. And nobody will be left out on an account of where they stay, or even disability, or even their circumstance. Every effort will be made to count people, and in terms of reaching them, we are already started the advocacy and publicity campaign for the census, in which we want to reach everybody, not just those in the urban area. We are also going to carry out or even we have started the process of carrying out massive public enlightenment in the rural areas using the community structures. We have the traditional rulers. We have been engaging them to help us reach their subjects wherever they are. And in due course, we'll be inaugurating the census publicity committees that will be composed of government officials, women, youth group, religious group, traditional rulers, community-based organizations, and through their membership of the census publicity committees, particularly at the local government levels, they'll be able to help us educate, sensitize their members wherever they are. So the issue of vulnerability will not really be a challenge, in the 2023 census. We look forward to conduct not just a digital and transformative census, but also an inclusive one in which everybody will be counted and nobody will be left behind.
Then, Doctor, you know what, Doctor? We want to make room for some of our viewers to be able to call in, make comments, and ask questions. And when we get that, please stay with us. When we get that, we'll let you know what those questions are. The lines are now open for our viewers to, contribute their part. That's the way of this morning on TVC. The program wouldn't be the same without your contribution. So we've been speaking with Dr. Isiaka Yahaya, and he's been telling us the efforts that have been, gone to conduct an accurate and credible census. The figures now that are being used, figures in the area of 216 million, so one can say over 200 million. It doesn't seem to be such an age ago that people were talking about 100 million being a big figure, and then it went up to 120, 150, and here we are at 216 estimate, and we'll see. It's very, very important, as we all know. But the difficulty has been how to actually conduct credible and, a credible census. People have forever been arguing in Nigeria about the authenticity of census figures. There are those who feel that they might, be more. Maybe some people feel that some people should be less. But Mr. George in Ikeja, good morning to you, sir. Your comment, or if you had a question for Dr. Yahaya?
Yes, a couple of questions, if you give me time.
Okay, yeah.
The first one has to do with the timing. I noticed that the timing of this census coincides with the period of elections. With the kind of movement and the type, the kind of atmosphere that will be prevalent at that time. Does it think it is feasible like that?
Okay.
Why not some months after the election? That is one. The second one, I heard him say that Nigerians outside the country will not be counted. I don't know what will make them Nigerians. We have embassies in any country we have a diplomatic relationship with. Can't Nigerians in such countries be counted through the embassies?
All right, then.
The third one, if you will give me the face, is about...
Mr. George, you are a Nigerian. You asked for two, you're going for three. Carry on.
Okay. What role will the digital economy play in this census?
Okay.
How? I just want him to explain.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to be captured digitally?
Okay. All right, then. In fact, I could see, Dr. Yahaya, that you were taking notes yourself. So please, would you like to respond? Maybe. Okay. I've just been told by our technical guys that it's good you've taken notes, but that at the moment you can't respond. So that's because we're taking calls. It's an important enough subject, and it concerns every single one of us, as indeed do all subjects on our program. But this one particularly, because every Nigerian listening is actually a figure in the upcoming population. So it will be interesting to hear the way Dr. Yahaya responds. One, to Mr. George's first question of not understanding why won't Nigerians abroad be counted, and also he wanted to know the timing in April. It's within the electoral, sort of timetable. He's wondering about that. And then the role of the digital age, digital economy. Those are the three questions that he wants Dr. Yahaya to respond to. Did I hear the name? Is it Ekwe from Cross River? Did I get... Ukwe. Okay, I'll soon see it as soon as it's written, but Ukwe has called in from... Okwe has called in from Cross River. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Yeah, go ahead, please. Did you have a question for the Public Affairs Director of the National Population Commission?
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Tell us your question. Okwe in Cross River, what's your question?
I have a question for him.
Go ahead, ask the question.
My question is that this upcoming National Population Commission exercise, is this going to take place inside the prison yard too?
Inside the... Well, I didn't hear that word. Is it going to take place inside the...
The prison yard, the prison. I mean the prison.
Oh, okay. In prisons. Okay, I hear you. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that question, Mr. Okwe, calling in, who wants to know, how about those, in correctional facilities? What's going to happen to them? And that's following on the heels of the question by Mr. George, which was a trident, a three-pronged question. We want the timing, to the role of digital age, and I think the third one, if I don't forget, is coinciding with an important electoral cycle. So we have two questioners, two people who have asked questions so far. I can see that Dr. Yahaya was taking notes, so he'll be talking to us about that. And Mazi Okorafor, your question, sir, for Dr. Yahaya, or your comment for the subject matter.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, Dr. Yahaya. Doctor, I see the census is a must because we don't have data in this country, because the past one does not cover our present demography. Now, my question to the doctor is this. The embassies we have in different countries, at least your agency should try and train people in those embassies so that people can go there and research across the continent. And back home, you should make use of the religious leaders and traditional leaders and youth leaders now and educate Nigerians now before the time. And even you're supposed to recruit people by now and train them. Between now and April, look at the time limit. It's very short because you have to train people. Because when you talk about digital, anything that has to do with digital, it needs proper training and retraining so that people will be competent and master the machine or the equipment you are going to use by that time. Not doing hurry work. Hurry work will bring wrong record. And people should try as much as avoid the national data should assist people. Good morning, Dr. Yahaya and Sayuri. Good morning.
Thank you very much, Mazi Okoroafo. Interesting questions that came up. Presently, Dr. Yahaya will be asking about that. For the moment, we just could take three callers, and starting with Mr. George, who wants to a bit more on the timing, and it's coinciding with an election timetable. Will that be a problem? And also the role of digital economy. And I think there's one other question that I'm losing right now. But Dr. Yahaya was taking notes. The other one was from Okwe in Cross River. He wants to know what's going to happen to people in correctional facilities, detention centers at the time of the census. And Mazi Okorofo has just asked, so why are religious leaders, I think his suggestion is that religious leaders can also be of assistance in this exercise. And he observed that the time seems to be a bit short between now and April. And, do we have enough time to train I imagine the enumerators, the specialists, people that will do the work, train them properly so we come up with a credible census. So those are the questions that Dr. Yahaya will be addressing. He was taking notes, so it'll probably go in, And then maybe I could also add from here, pending when we get Dr. Yahaya, there are people who, I just use the expression credible censuses. There are people who have issues with how credible the census was. Has something been done to enhance certain populations or not? There have always been those suspicions. They always come up, not very much different, I imagine, from the kind of apprehension people have as well with electoral statistics. The registers and that kind of a thing. So those are the questions that as soon as we can get Dr. Isiaka Yahaya back, he's the Director of Public Affairs, National Population Commission, is our guest today, and it's on a very, very important matter in our national life. Somebody else out there, has been, it was Mr. George. So let's see now. Dr. Yahaya, I understand that we're back up. Could you go ahead, please? Which one of those questions would you, okay, would you like to start with the first question, the first person who asked a question, and that was Mr. George calling in from Lagos, and he was looking at the timing that wouldn't be a bit jam-packed, coinciding with the electoral cycle. That was the first question he asked. Okay, he followed that up with, the role of digital, the whole digital economy, the whole digital landscape now. Is that going to be part of the tools that would be deployed? He wanted to know about that. And, as Dr. Yahaya is gearing up to be able to answer those questions. Dr. Yahaya, Dr. Isiaka Yahaya. Okay. And also, viewers wanted to know what will happen to those that are detained legally in a correctional facility somewhere. How do those figure? Mr. George, also the third question I think was it a question or observation? Yeah, it was actually a point that he made, that he was surprised to hear that Nigerians abroad wouldn't be counted, and that there was nothing strange about that. And,
several questions have been asked, very, very good questions and interesting, and we appreciate, the kind of positive interest, Nigerians have about the census. We share their optimism. We appreciate the fact that they believe that the census can be conducted, of course, with some fears, and some of those fears and concerns that have been raised, I will try to respond to them. The first question is whether, the 2006 census, the 2023 census is not coming too close to another important event, that is the 2023 general election. The Commission has actually taken this fact into consideration, look at all the facts on ground, and remain convinced that the 2023 census can be conducted in spite of the fact that we're going to have an election in 2023. And this confidence is based on a number of a number of factors. Number one, the census calendar has been designed in a way that will insulate the electoral process from the census. You note that the trial census was conducted between June, July, and by August, we are done with the trial census. This was after the nomination by political parties. And now the campaign for election has started. As far as we are concerned, this is the low period for us. No major preparatory activity is taking place for now. Coming to the main census, the election will have been conducted, the winners declared by the last election will take place in early March 2023. The first, which is the presidential election, will take place at the end of February. When you look at this, and the census will not come 1 month after that, the conduct of the election. So I do not see any relationship, any negative or inverse relationship between the census and the election. In any case, there is nothing at stake from the census that will affect the election. When you talk about the so-called political issues of the election, that's in terms of political representation, in terms of allocation or delineation of constituency, obviously all this will have been passed. The 2023 census result, the 2023 census result will not be used for delineation purpose, for voter register, for nomination of candidate in 2023. So there's nothing that will come out of 2023 election that will negatively affect the 2023 census. In any case, we need to understand the fact that census is a very peaceful exercise. Unlike election, where there are contestants, trying to get the trying to win election at all costs, there's nothing at stake in relation to census that will make the exercise so contentious, so divisive. In fact, if anything, we need to conduct the 2023 election 2023 census to heal the wound of 2023 general election. Because during the election, expectedly, there will be, disagreement, tension will be very high, because those who lose the election, they will not be very happy, and all those. And then you need that census to come around to remind all of us that the most important thing is the development of the society, that candidates, those who have lost and won the election, and those who still need to come together for the purpose of the census to ensure that their respective communities are counted and that the figures are available for planning. So as regards the relationship between the census and the election, I do not see any negative one. Rather, I can see a kind of complementary process, that will produce a very peaceful census after the election. So that's about that. As regards the question of what will it take Nigeria to count, its citizens outside the country? Of course, definitely no. And if you have a good diplomatic relation, this can be done easily. But the point that is being made is that a census of Nigerians in diaspora cannot be done within the context of a national census, because the methodology will be different. Unlike in the census, when you carry out demarcation of the country into small enumeration areas, for purposes of counting, you also collect some other information. You cannot do that if it is a diaspora census. The highest you can do that if there are Nigerians staying in certain parts of it, you can only isolate those Nigerians and count them. It will not be a comprehensive. So census diasporas can be done, but it has never been done and cannot be done within the context of a national census. Those who have good records of their citizens, outside in Nigeria, for example, they don't do it as part of their census. The United States just completed the census in 2020. This did not take place simultaneously with the counting of Americans in Nigeria, and this is how it works. As regards the question about whether the census will take place in correctional facilities, definitely yes. If you recall the definition of census, it is the count of all persons within the geographical space of the country. And of course, the correctional facilities also fall within the geographical space, so they will be counted. The point is that counting or enumeration within facilities such as the prison falls under what we call institutional household, because they are not the regular household where you have the heads of household, you have the children, and there are relationships between the various members of the household. But for the prison, it's what we call institutional household, and they will all be counted. And of course,
I've got to cut in now, Doctor. I beg your pardon. I've got to cut in now, Doctor. Dr. Yahaya, the only one that you would have spoken on, but we've run out of time, is the use of religious leaders, and also the thought that the time might be short and we will have the time to train the people, the specialists that will be needed. But Thank you very much. Appreciation goes to you, Dr. Isiaka Yahaya, Director, Public Affairs, National Population Commission, for joining us this morning on our focus on the National Census. Thank you very much, Dr. Yahaya, for your time. Okay, so that's our program today. Please join us tomorrow for a fresh edition. I am Yori Folane. Bye-bye for now.